Hello, I'm Richard Chambers, Senior Advisor of Risk and Audit for Audit Board, and welcome to another in my podcast series, Speaking of Risk and Audit. I'm joined today by a good friend and someone who is well known to the internal audit community, Trent Russell. Trent is the host of his own podcast, the Audit Podcast, it's appropriately named, and also the founder of Green Sky Analytics. And I was fortunate enough to convince Trent to come into the podcast and have a conversation with me about AI and what's really going on in internal audit and AI in 2025. And Trent, thank you for joining me. Tell our folks a little bit about Green Sky Analytics and what's been going on with you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me. So Green Skies Analytics is purely internal audit. We work only with internal audit departments for historically analytics and now obviously AI. And so we've always said we make analytics and AI actually work for internal audit because that's what we typically see with technology as there's adoption to a degree and then it kind of falls off for various reasons. And so we help make sure that adoption sticks and that it actually works for internal auditors. As you mentioned, I host the Audit Podcast. Specific to AI, we launched a new series, so it's still under the Audit Podcast. And honestly, I forget if it's called AINIA or AIA on AI. I can't remember, but if you just remember the Audit Podcast, so that's a weekly series we started doing. There's a lot of weekly, daily AI news podcasts and newsletters, but none of them say, hey, internal audit, this is how you should think about this. Here's the risks. Here's even the opportunities. So we've been doing that for maybe a few months now. That seems to have add a lot of value to a lot of people from what we've heard. So in addition to that, we also host the Audit Analytics and AI Conference, two of those a year. So online, all practitioner led. The goal there is they have to show people how to actually do this stuff instead of just talk about why you should do it. They pull up their screens. Here's how you build a dashboard. Here's this agent that we built, etc. So those are a few of the things that we've been working on over the past few years.
You know, I've known you for a few years, and I would tell you that I think when it comes to this topic, we got the right person in the right place at the right time, and I'm really pleased to be able to hear what you have to say. I sat in on a webinar you did recently for Audit Board, and I was really intrigued by some of the conversation. And one of the things that you talked about was AI and internal audit hype versus reality. In fact, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking that's probably going to be what we're going to title this session. And so I want to bounce a few things off of you, Trent. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of share the hype, and then you tell me what the reality is. So there's a lot of hype out there that everyone is already using AI. We are already behind. What do you say to somebody who's wringing their hands and saying that?
For the most part, that's not true. There's still some, unfortunately, internal audit departments that go, we still don't have access to a tool because our organization won't give it to us or we don't have it org wide. I've started to see that decrease a little bit over the past probably 8 months. I think the tools have been around long enough now, so people know the risks involved. And as you might expect, that's usually financial services that kind of were, less likely to introduce these tools. But yeah, some of the financial services teams that we talk to, they go, yep, we have it now, we can use it, et cetera. So there's not as many folks that don't have access anymore. And to the degree of we are behind, for the most part, it's not true. I mean, even the big teams where they have maybe 15 full-time data analysts or AI experts or quants or whatever it is, their use cases are really similar to the smaller team use cases. It's just that they require so much more to get it off the ground.
Yeah.
Because of the data size, the complexity of a big business, all the things that kind of the red tape you could say that goes into that. So there, I don't think people are as far behind as they might think. But I will say, if you're looking for like some kind of benchmark, if you're not using it every single day, then you probably are behind. I certainly don't go a day, work or personal, without using it. And to that point, I've always said this with analytics: find your hobby, whatever it is that you care about outside of the office, find a data set around that, and just analyze that. And that'll
Yeah.
teach you the concepts and some level of data literacy. It's the same thing with AI.
Yeah.
I mean, I used AI for my fantasy football draft. I used AI to create the schedule for my kids' flag football team's practice, which kicks off in 2.5 hours. So I mean, that's the stuff I enjoy doing outside of
Yeah.
the office. And so that's where I've learned, oh, I didn't even know it could do this, or whatever the use
Yeah.
cases are personally.
You were telling me recently you've even removed, I believe I understood you to say you've removed your search engines from your laptop and sort of forcing yourself to use AI as a replacement for the search engine. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Take it off your phone. I think that's probably the number one thing. So whatever
Yep.
because it's just a habit. And so
Yep.
if your habit is open Safari search or open Chrome and search, if you delete that and you replace it, even the location of the icon with whatever your tool of choice, honestly, it doesn't really matter. Um, but replace it with your tool of choice, and then habitually you'll go to tap that same spot and they'll pull up. And there's some use cases or times where a search engine might make more sense than
Yep.
an AI tool, but pretty quickly figure those out.
Well, after you said that, I started doing exactly that. And what I get is I'll still get kind of like the short answer first, which is what I would have gotten if I'd gone in and put it into a search engine if it was a question. And then if I want more information, it gives me a lot more information.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a way to break down the reluctance or the discomfort maybe with using AI. The second hype. We're a three-person shop and we're too small to benefit from AI.
I think what I said was you're like the perfect people to be using AI, because it's such a multiplier that that routine audit that you do over and over and over again. There's a lot of it you can automate the procedures, maybe not necessarily testing the controls yet. If you're that size, it takes a lot of um, AI development competency or AI engineering to do that, and not a lot of teams are doing that. But yeah, certainly the benefits to a small team are massive. And I found, I mean, I was part of a really small team. It was me and one other person. I mean, that's how small it was. And it seemed like we were either buried in work or it was kind of slow moving. And so I think for a lot of teams, maybe that's similar. And there is time during the day to learn this. And if there's not, and you're part of that small team, it's absolutely up to the leader of that team to go, no, everybody has X amount of time a week or a day or whatever. I need you to spend time in these tools.
Good point. Third one, if I feed my data into Chat GPT, I'll get instant answers.
That came from a client we were working with, and they said, "Hey, we want to take the IA, the standards, and we want to take our kind of QA procedures, and we just want to throw that into Chat GPT and build like a GPT, and then we want to like take all our work papers and have it run against all those work papers and tell us where it went wrong or what we didn't document." And I went, that's not exactly how it works. It requires a lot more
Yeah.
effort than that. So that really kind of stemmed from that and this idea of that the tool can just do it all and it's
Yeah.
all knowing and all encompassing, and it's really not. And that kind of goes back to the more
Yeah.
you play with it, and I'd say play, not even necessarily use, but like just play around with it, the more you'll understand what it can actually do and really what its limitations are right now.
I think it's probably fair to say you'll get instant information, but not instant answers.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, good, good. All right, how about this one? AI is still prone to hallucinations. We can't believe anything it says.
Yeah, that's still the case. And so that's where job safety, if anyone had that concern, you should feel good about it. And so hallucinations being it's not going to give you the same answer every single time, or it could even just be flat out wrong. And maybe without going into too much detail, all of the tools are doing are making a prediction based on a big database of words, is all it's
Mhm.
doing. And so it's not going to get it right every time. And if you want to test this to some degree, ask it the exact same question 3 different times. It'll give you 3 different answers. And
Wow.
it's kind of a good thing that it does that. It's almost like an opinion, to where you don't get the same answer every single time. But certainly, what I was saying about like job security, you still need auditors. You still need what this concept is called humans in the loop. So yeah, even if it tests all the controls for you, you still have to go back in and review that as if it was a staff that put it together or whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. There still needs to be a human reviewing the output. And I would say all the, like every single output that it ever gives you should be reviewed for now.
Which brings me to the last of the hype questions or the hype statements. And you may have just kind of answered it in the way you responded to the last one, but AI is going to replace us.
Not yet. Eventually, and by eventually I mean like 100 years from now. Um, but yeah, it's still the case of the auditors that know it are going to be the ones that are still pretty okay job wise. I think the term that's been thrown around lately is job displacement, so that's certainly a possibility. But the other thing that I tell people is even if you maybe you don't have the resources to do a pilot where an AI tool tests the controls for you, like maybe you don't have the budget to do it or whatever, you still need to consider what that's going to do to your team and how you're going to respond to that, because eventually that will be here. And I mean, when I say eventually, I mean it's here right now. There's 4 or 5 vendors that have popped up over the past 18 months that are tackling that problem, specifically mostly around socks. And so there is going to be a day where, let's just take socks as an example. Here's our socks, here's all our PVC, here's all the data, throw it into this tool, and it's going to actually do the testing for you. Okay, if that's taken away from us, from internal audit, and we're not doing that, then what is our role? And so that's where I think,
Hopefully, it's going to be to focus on real risks.
yeah,
I've never been a big proponent for spending a lot of internal audit time on SOX, so
socks, yeah,
that's not the worst case scenario. Here's another one. Oh, not another one, but here's another question. So
okay.
you speak about AI anxiety. What is that? AI anxiety, and is there a cure for it?
We're still trying to figure out the term. Somebody just sent me a list of different ways we could refer to it, but yeah, it's tough. AI anxiety, but basically, it's the anxiety. It's a term that we kind of coined off the top of our head during another podcast we recorded, but where you have anxiety about the future, mostly relative to your job because of AI and not knowing what's coming. And there's all these, it's not fear mongering, but I mean, it is kind of scary when you see some of the, I mean, I see them. I get these emails that are like, this thing, it can do this, this, and this now. And I go, well, that's what I do. So what am I supposed to do now? And I've had to constantly like pivot and change what I do. Um, so that's what AI anxiety is. The cure for it is to pay attention more so to the thought leaders who I would say don't have maybe monetary stakes in the game. So like researchers are going to be more likely to kind of tell you the truth as opposed to I have this tech company and my livelihood and my company's livelihood depends on us getting to the next level of AI. So we have to hype it up and say we're there and that it can do this and this. So really understanding and I would say even following the right people that are talking about this. But the more you know about the reality of AI and where it is right now, the less anxiety that you will likely have.
Good point. Good point. All right, let's strip away the conversation about AI and let's talk about how it's used in internal audit. So the term that gets thrown around a lot, you've used it, are use cases. So so when we think about what are the most promising use cases for AI, I'm going to throw out some use cases that I've heard you talk about, and you tell me whether you're keen on it or what advice you might give. So data analysis and anomaly detection.
Huge fan of that, primarily because that's what we've always done at Green Skies is analytics. And it has really taken away from one of the common issues we found in a lack of data literacy when we work with folks, or even being able to take the results of an analysis, and especially if it's something that's relatively stats heavy. And if we just go, here, now interpret that. For the most part, people couldn't do it unless they were in data, like had a data background. And so to be able to even just talk to the tool and say, uh, Z score is always a favorite of mine. I got this transaction with a Z score of 8.6. What does that mean? Or you can, this is where I want to be like very clear about this. Absolutely do not just throw your data into these tools, your org data. From the folks that we've worked with, there's usually a hierarchy. This data is confidential. This is sensitive. This should not go in there. This data is fine. It's okay to go in there. So make sure in your AI governance policies, procedures, all that good stuff that you know what can and can't go in there. But you can just throw data in there and then start talking to it to some degree.
Yeah.
Show me the duplicate invoices for this, and it writes the code in the background and then spits out the results. So I'm a huge fan of analytics and anomaly detection.
Another popular use case is, and again, I think we're just really in the infancy here of this, but report writing and documentation.
Yeah, being able to take the testing, throw it into the tool, and it spit out the report. If you want it to be really accurate, you need some level of engineering to do that. But there's still even the teams that don't have that. They have just kind of like, I'm just going to call it like the common set of AI tools. It'll still get you really close, and you have to play with it and configure it as a way of saying it to get it to exactly where you want it to be. But even being able to take out like an issue and say, hey, this, I'd struggle with this. I had this very like technical issue, and I said Windows AD, whatever. I don't even remember what it said. And the person reviewing it said the board has no idea what that means. What is Windows AD? And so to be able to like take it back and go, can you help me explain this or write this to a board member and tweak it that way is also really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. What about risk assessment and planning?
That's probably where we see the most. Like that's the most common use cases on RCMs. And advice there would be to be as specific as possible. So it's one thing to say, give me a RCM for payroll. It's another thing to say, this is maybe how much goes through payroll. This is the size of our organization. This is the type of organization that we're in. As much context as you can give to it. And then the kind of the number one prompting tip is to give it examples. So here's an example of what I want the output to be. Is a really good. So you can take all of your like previous RCMs and kind of upload them in there. Again, this is going to be the ones that it's protected behind your organization, firewall, all that good stuff. Don't put it into a public instance of this or a personal instance of this stuff. But say like, here's the examples. Now give it to me, and it's going to be significantly better. RCMs are not super easy to write. I mean, on the IT side, they are, but for me, I've always thought it was magic how business process auditors came up with those things. So to be able to do that and to do it lightning fast is really, really good use case. And again, probably the number one that we see.
What about continuous auditing and monitoring?
I think on that, you can definitely use these tools to build those out easier than you could previously. And then with that, on the continuous auditing, the definition of that I think is about to change entirely. So historically, it was we have data and we're going to run, these automated analytics against that data. We'll take the results. Maybe we have a bot that's downloaded the evidence for us, and we can manually compare that. So imagine that is already automated, except now there are ways that the actual testing, filling in the lead sheets, checking does this thing match this thing, and checking, check marking the attributes A, B, C, D, and doing that for you. So that's going to be continuous auditing. There's still going to be the same kind of concerns there in terms of, I guess the number one issue we see is people don't get buy-in from management. So they just go, we're going to build this thing and management's going to love it. And then management goes, we don't want to be audited 24 hours a day. No, we don't want that. And so you still have to have that communication with them and the
Yeah,
relationship to
yeah.
go, if we build this, will you come kind of thing.
Let me ask you a question. What do you think is the biggest risk for an internal audit function that's using AI or starting to use AI? What's your biggest caution?
Putting sensitive information or sensitive data in there, and really maybe higher level, not following your AI governance policies and procedures. I think that's the thing that'll get you in trouble the quickest. There's ways to monitor what's going into these, and especially as internal audit. I feel like we kind of have to set the example on
Yeah,
controls and
yeah,
to go, like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize I put a bunch of social security numbers in there is not a great look. So
no,
right now, that's still the number one. And I would say, thinking about it from another perspective, not using the tools is a bigger risk than using them, if that makes
right.
sense. Yeah.
No, it does. It's kind of use AI responsibly, I think would
Yeah.
be the theme, right?
Mhm.
All right. Well, let me bring us to a close by asking you a sort of the forward-looking question. And everybody has um, their own opinion about what the future looks like for internal audit. But if I said to you, you and I are sitting here in 5 years from now, and and we're talking about internal audit and AI, what would be different than what we're saying today?
I think by then it will be pretty common to have regulatory or like your annual audits completely automated. So SOX testing by year in 5 years, I would fully expect SOX testing to be something where we don't really do a ton with it other than review the work paper. So that's where I see internal audit is on the review side, definitely more on the foresight side of things. And I think it still has to, it's like the same stuff that we've talked about forever. It's still about adding value to the organization. And hopefully the promise of, well, if we aren't spending time testing SOX controls or these regulatory controls or whatever the case is, that we can actually add value somewhere. I think that's where it's going to be, which is not a great original answer, I realize, but that's where it kind of has to be. Otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah. Great insights, Trent. I could sit here and talk to you about this all day, and I'm excited about the progress you're making out there and helping internal audit functions become more comfortable with AI. And hopefully, we can have you back here again to talk about some of the topics that we've been kicking around to talk about them in a little more detail. In the meantime, I'm Richard Chambers, the Senior Advisor for Risk and Audit. And thanks again for joining us on another episode of Speaking of Risk and Audit.